Just like to offer a big shout out to Touchdown Digital, the sponsor of this week's video.
Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Glenn Samuel and you're watching Sniper Photography. Today I want to talk to you about our trip to Iceland and the photographic aspects of Iceland, how to get there, the cost of getting to Iceland and while you're there, where to start and where to go, and getting around the ring road, the best way to do that, and what camera gear you need, and then how to photograph Iceland itself. Now, first up, we spent 11 days traveling around the ring road. We drove around the ring road in a rental four-wheel drive. But how do you get to Iceland? Well, there's a couple of ways. From Australia, we went through the US, over to LA, to Seattle, and then over to Iceland. So it's two international flights. Or you can go through Europe, and that takes a little bit longer, but you will eventually get there. So we went through the United States, and we flew Delta, which were very, very good. 14.5 hours to LA, had a 4-hour layoff, and then we had a 7-hour trip, 8-hour trip to Iceland. So all up at about 27 hours, 28 hours we were awake. So it is a long way from Australia. It is a shorter distance from Europe. Iceland's only about 3 hours by flight from Scotland. Iceland is a very small country with a population of 400,000 people. And the capital of Reykjavik, that's where most people are. Now, that's how you get there. The cost, first up, I've got to get this out of the way. Getting to Iceland is expensive, especially from Australia. But whilst you're there, it is very, very expensive. Iceland, super expensive, to the point where it cost me $175 for 50 litres of fuel or petrol. And it is just very, very expensive. Now, that's not because of the exchange rate. That is just because Iceland is an expensive country to visit. Iceland also has the second highest income in the world. Probably about 1.8 more than Australian salaries. So it is right up there. It's second in the world, actually. But the cost of things there are very, very high. Once you're there, you will experience that. So if you're planning on a trip to Iceland, you've got to bank on, pardon the pun, you've got to bank on carrying a lot of money with you or have a lot of money in your account because it's all card over there. Just tap and go or insert your card. But Iceland is very, very expensive. On average, we were there for 11 days. We were spending $700 a day. That's what we were spending, $700, maybe a little bit more, maybe $750 a day. That's through accommodation and food. The best way to do it, we found, was to hire a vehicle from Keflavik Airport. That's where the main airport is. Then you drive into Reykjavik, and then from there, I think the first port of call was Hoffen, and we went south around the ring road. You can go north, but we went south and down and around. The ring road is around about 1,980 kilometres in length. It's just one road right around the country. Basically, Iceland is one big volcano. So you're driving around it, and then you can put in another, say, 300 kilometres for the other part of the ring road, which is called the Golden Circle, which we did do in 11 days. So about $750 a day. The best way we found was to just book accommodation before we left Australia. We had 8 hotels whilst we were in Reykjavik. You might have 250, 190, 300 kilometres between each hotel or each town, but that'll take you all day because there's so much to see once you're in Iceland. Once you do what I call the major 5 big bangers, the big hits, that's the Diamond Beach, the big waterfalls, and the Golden Circle, that's as far as most tourists go. And they usually sail on a cruise ship to Iceland, and then they do day trips. It is a good way to see Iceland, but not really the best way because you miss out on so much. We worked out that once the tourist buses got to Diamond Beach, where the broken off glaciers wash up onto the beach and sand, and I'll show you images through this video, That's where the tourist coaches stop. They don't go any further because once you get on the ring road, it's very hard to turn around because it's a very narrow road and there isn't a lot of pull-outs or pull-offs where you can stop and get out and take photos. Not like Canada or the US. So Iceland's a little bit behind on the tourist situation, tourist business, even though tourism is very high on the economy ladder or economic ladder for Iceland. So they just haven't really got that right. But the cost is very, very high. We found that every hotel we booked, the 8 hotels we booked right around the ring road, stopping every night, it included breakfast in the cost. That way you didn't have to buy breakfast. We just took a light lunch with us, like some nibblies and things during the day in the car because we're constantly going and stopping. And then we'd have a light meal of a night. Now, unfortunately, the further you get away from Reykjavik, the more barren Iceland becomes. And you start to run out of options as to where you can eat. So the accommodation that we had, had restaurants in them, and that's where the expense is. Like you're looking at $170 for just a meal of lamb. Lamb is one of their best, probably their most lucrative market. They let lamb run free there, and the lamb there is beautiful. They eat a little red berry, and it's absolutely fantastic taste. Tastes different to Aussie or New Zealand lamb, but it's very, very, very expensive once again. So you've got to really plan this trip if you're going to Iceland. You have to really plan it and plan it thoroughly. And there's even more planning to come in this video concerning photography and locations. So once the tourists get out of your way after the 5 big bangers, you've got Iceland to yourself. As I said, it only has a population of 400,000, but as you move away from Reykjavik, either south or north or whatever which way you go, you can only go that way or that way around it, and I'll show you the map of Iceland. You'll start to, the crowds just dissipate and you're in the middle of nowhere. You're actually driving around volcanoes, which have hardened over years and years and years, and they're all covered in green moss, and I'll show you a photo of that here. Just an unbelievable landscape. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been rather fortunate to travel the world with my cameras, but I've never, ever, ever seen a landscape like Iceland. So once again, that's how to get there, and the cost of getting to Iceland and travelling around Iceland is very, very expensive. Where to start and go? Well, as I said, you can either go, if you look at the map of Iceland, you've got Reykjavik, you can go left or you can go right. We went right, so we go down the bottom of it and started to stop in the towns around. And as I said, the further you get away from Reykjavik, the more barren it becomes. And you will find accommodation there. Some of them aren't the best. I could say rate them in Australian standards or US standards 3, maybe 3. We had a couple which were 4, but that's about it. That's about all you'll get. But yeah, you're better off doing it that way. I don't think you can see Iceland or any other country for that matter by doing bus tours. I've never done a bus tour and I don't think I'd like it. I've watched these people, they get off the bus, they run to their scenic lookouts, and within 10 minutes they're racing back to the coach, on again, and away they go. If you're a serious photographer, you won't be doing that. Simple as that. But once you get past the crowds, and you'll be fine. I wouldn't suggest going to Iceland in the peak of summer because it's very, very close to Europe or Northern Europe, and a lot of Europeans travel to Iceland for their holidays, and it'd be just too busy. You wouldn't be able to even get a look in at some of these, especially the 5 big ones, the 5 big attractions of Iceland. So go in the off-season or off-peak season like we did. You got more freedom and less people. Accommodation around the ring road, as I said, we just booked accommodation right around the ring road as we went. The accommodation was pretty good. Some of it was basic, but it was very, very good. One thing I did notice about Iceland, their internet is superior to what we have in Australia, and that is embarrassing, to be quite honest. Just superior internet, Wi-Fi. Also too, a lot of the streets in Reykjavik, getting back to Reykjavik, are underground heated. The streets are heated through thermal steam and water. And as you're coming back around the ring road, you will see where that plant is, and it's an incredible place. It just really is a mind-blowing place, Iceland. So getting around it is okay. The further you go away from Reykjavik along the ring road, the one thing they haven't got right, the Icelandic people or the government, is how to direct tourists to locations. Because you'll be driving along the ring road, and as I said, there's no pull-outs or stopovers where you can pull over on the side of the road and let other cars go and you get out and take photos. That doesn't happen like it happens in the States and Canada. They have these side roads that run off the ring road, and they're just dirt, pothole, volcanic roads, and you can drive on them, but by geez, they are bad. They are really, really bad, some of these roads. I certainly wouldn't buy an ex-rental car from Iceland, because by geez, they cop a hammering, and people, they just don't know how to drive on those dirt roads. They're tourists and they're just hammering along, hitting potholes and bouncing around. The roads are really bad, but they're not very well signposted. It's just like having a street sign pointed that way with a name of about 26 letters in which you can't pronounce. So this is why you've got to do your planning on where to go and what to see before you go to Iceland, because they're not well signposted. And the kicker for this is the last 12 months, the Icelandic government have put in paid parking at nearly every location. Now, with the 4 or 5 big bangers, which I call the scenic spots, they have proper car parks with metered parking. They're unmanned parking. It takes a photo of your registration number plate as you go in and as you go out, and you pay by card, which is okay. But when you're travelling along the ring road and you're getting further away from basically civilization, you're coming across these dirt side roads, and you know for a fact at the end of those dirt side roads are glaciers and magnificent scenery. It's just incredible. But you've got to transverse across these dirt, potholed, incredibly bad roads. And at the end, you've got to pay for it. And if you don't pay for it, and if you've got a rental car, before you leave the country and you go and return that rental car, your fines are waiting for you. Yep, that's right. They don't miss you. You can't get out of it. You have to pay before you leave the country. So you have to pay. And I think they need to get that part right. They need to get their act together, the Icelandic government, and try and fix this for the tourists, because it will deter a lot of people from going there. And let's face it, besides lamb growing, sheep, and lamb manufacturing and seafood, tourism's the next big thing for Iceland, and I think they've really got to look at it, which in due time I think they will. So you've got to pay as you're getting around the ring road. What camera gear do you need? Well, you need a lot, because you're only going to go there once. I only know 2 people that went there. The first person went there and they were a bit sad they didn't take all their gear with them. The next fellow that I know that went there, he went on a cruise ship and did the 5 big ones, and now he's sorry he did it that way. He is now going back and hiring a vehicle like we did. And that's the best way to see any country as far as I'm concerned. We've done it in the US, we've done it in Canada, we've done it in New Zealand, Japan, Switzerland, you name it. That's how to see a country. Drive around for at least 10 to 15 days and you'll see a lot. You won't see a lot when you're on a tourist coach with all other people with their mobile phones. What camera gear do you need? Well, I took quite a lot. I'll put a list up. I'll try and put a list up of what I took. Basically, I took 2 camera bodies and 6 lenses, batteries, chargers, iPad, computer, a whole lot, tripod. Took a speed light with me, GoPro. I took quite a lot of gear. I also took a rain cover for the camera and tripod, because when you're close to these waterfalls, now these waterfalls are 600 feet. They're just huge, and you'll see photos here. They're just massive. You won't see anything bigger than that. And there's a lot of spray coming off them, and you get actually drenched. You really do. So you got to, my cameras can take a bit of water, but I didn't want to run the risk of having problems while I was away. So I covered them up with a proper Oputech camera rain cover, which covers the camera and about half of the tripod, and you can still manage and use the controls on the camera and still see the live view screen and the viewfinder. So that helps a lot. You need to take rain cover or protection for your camera when you go to Iceland, and also clothing. You need warm clothing there. We weren't in winter, but it was starting to get very cold 3 weeks ago. We're just going into the beginning of November now. We were there 3 weeks ago and it was starting to get very, very cold. So you've got to take appropriate clothing. And footwear. Forget about runners or sand shoes. For goodness sakes, you need hiking boots and you need waterproof hiking boots because you're walking through a lot of mud and slush and, you know, I've seen so many people with ruined sand shoes and runners. I just couldn't believe it. Well, they don't understand anyway. They don't understand the environment or the landscape. So wear proper clothing, proper shoes, head protection, because as I said, it does get very cold, rain jackets, spray jackets, and waterproof trousers or pants if you got them, because the weather can change within seconds in Iceland. So we found out, but I was prepared for it because I'd done the homework and I'd done my research. You've got to do your research. That's a big thing. So you do need a lot of camera gear because if one fails, you've still got a backup, but you're probably only ever going to go there once. And I don't think one camera and one lens can do the job. I really don't think so, because sometimes you might need a telephoto. I took the 100 to 400, the 70 to 200, 16 to 35, 24 to 105, 50 millimeter, the GoPro, and a 24 millimeter tilt shift, because in Iceland there are a lot of churches. A lot of churches. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen so many churches. Very religious country, Iceland. And I'll put some of those churches up in this video and maybe at the end of this video as well. So that's the gear you need. You do need to take a lot of camera gear. How to photograph it? Well, let's start with the 5 big ones when there's still a lot of tourists around. And most of these people, while I was there, I noticed, I was observing how many people had cameras, and there was probably 5%, 95% of people were taking photos with their phones, so they're not real photographers. But there's an issue, and people that have done a lot of travelling like we have, when you go into these areas and there seems to be a lot of tourist people, it's very hard to get your shot. Now, 2 instances here. The first one was we're at Sisyphos, or I think it's Gossifos or something like that, a big waterfall, massive waterfall, huge, incredible scenery. And there was a lot of people there, and I thought, well, how am I going to get the shot here? Well, I had my tripod and my camera mounted on my tripod. Now, this might sound a bit harsh, a bit arrogant, but I really don't care, because this is how I do it. And I learnt this quickly in my local area in the Blue Mountains, that when you walk into an area when there's a lot of tourists and you have your camera on a tripod, you just walk straight in. Yes, you walk straight in with your tripod, you splay the 3 legs out, and you just part the waters, and that way, that's how you get your shot. You don't have to be nasty or mean or swear and carry on at people, but just mosey on in with your tripod, spread the legs, and you'll find that people with their phones will realise, hang on, this guy's serious, let's move out of the way. I've never had a problem doing that. So try that next time you're in a high traffic volume tourist area on your travels. Set up your tripod in amongst them and you'll see what I mean. You'll be able to get your shots. However, this next shot of the plane wreck, very famous location, super hard to get to. It's a 2-kilometre walk in onto the beach and then another 2-kilometre walk out. Or you can catch, for $25, catch a 10-minute little bus ride out to the plane wreck car park. And that's what we did. Now, up until, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this area was not really heavily photographed. It was photographed by serious photographers. But these days, Instagram has made it, well, it's prostituted the place, quite frankly. We were there, we took the little coach bus out there, paid the 25 Australian dollars, return ticket, the wife and I. And when we got there, there was quite a few people. Now, it says in the documentation about this plane wreck, do not climb on the plane fuselage. Do not climb on the wings. But you guessed it, these self-propelled Instagram selfies were climbing all over the plane. Now, I could see what was going on. I thought, well, this is disrespectful. These people either don't care or they're just plain dumb. And they're there, people are taking their selfies, they're up there doing this, they're up there doing all this bloody shit and all this, right? Sorry about that, but that's the way I was feeling at the time. And I know that other people were standing around waiting to take their photos of this plane wreck. It's iconic location, and here's the photo here, as I said. And there was a few handful of people that were, after about 20 minutes, were still standing on the plane. And no one could get a clear shot. You're not going to take a photo of this plane wreck with some stranger in your photo, are you? You're not going to do that. So my wife could see that I was becoming agitated, and that's the last thing anyone wants to see, I can tell you right now. And she said something. My wife said, how long are you going to be? She was polite. She said, how long are you going to be? Other people are here. We need to take some photos as well. Well, they ignored her. Big mistake. So my wife fired up, and she said, can you get off the plane? One, it's disrespectful, and other people are standing here waiting to take photos, which we were. There was a French guy with his tripod ready to take a photo, and I think he was a bit embarrassed to say anything, which is a bit surprised for the French, because they'll tell you where to go. But eventually they moved, and then another crowd turned up and started climbing all over the plane. Well, that's when I spoke up, and there was quite a few people milling around the aircraft, around the fuselage. There was people standing on top doing all this rubbish. And I said something, and these people, everyone turned around. They probably heard this big booming Australian Aussie voice. And I said, I think you better move, mate. I think you better move. There's other people waiting to take photographs. And it's also disrespectful. And with that, he moved, because he thought, and I could see it clicking over, that this big man from Australia was not going to back down. And I wasn't going to back down. I mean, fair go for everyone. I don't mind people taking photos, but have some consideration for others. So if you go there, be prepared to, you might have to say something. And Aussies being Aussies, guess what? We'll speak our mind, and that's what we did. And eventually got the shots, as you can see there. So that was really the only issue with that location. And I did predict that to the wife before we left Australia. I said the plane wreck's going to be busy. It's going to be idiots and morons climbing all over it, which that's what they are. They just don't care. Disrespectful to the actual historic part of that scene, and disrespectful to people that are trying to just do the right thing and take a photo and then move on. I only need 2 photographs, so that's what I did. Also, how to photograph it. I think wide angle is very, very good, but you also need a telephoto because sometimes you just can't get close enough. But the main thing is that the weather changes so quickly and the light changes so quickly. And it's not necessarily about, and you'll see some more images here through this video and at the back end of this video, it's not only about the waterfalls and things like that. There's other things you can photograph, like the roads, because you're in the middle of nowhere, and I was using the roads as leading lines, as you can see here. So there's plenty to photograph in Iceland. It is an incredible place, and it's worth seeing. How would I rate it out of 10? It's got to be a 9. I'd rate it a 9. The reason why I don't give it a 10 is because the Icelandic government still haven't got this tourism thing sorted out. The signage is very, very poor. As I said, once you leave the main parts of the big 5 scenic sites and you start to go up into the interior or right around the top end of Iceland, it's very, very sparse, and the locations are there. But if you haven't done your homework or your research, or you're not with a local person, you're going to drive right past them and you're not going to see them. So you need to do your homework and you need to do your research before you go to Iceland. And as I said, the best way to see it is to hire a 4-wheel drive and just drive around, pre-book everything in Australian dollars before you leave Australia, especially if you're coming from Australia. Just pre-book everything. Try not to eat lunch. Have your accommodation and your breakfast at the same time, and then have something light for lunch. Just go to a local grocery store, which we did in Reykjavik before we left. and we had enough to go around the entire country during the day, and then overnight, well, unfortunately, you might have to eat in the restaurant that is in the hotels, and that's where they are very expensive. Food-wise, the food is outstanding. I've got to say that. The food is outstanding, so we really didn't mind paying the price. And the people that work there, this is the thing, the people that work in the hotels, the motels, the shops, they're all from Poland. They're all Polish people between the ages of 20 and 40. They're all from Poland, working in Iceland. I didn't see many Icelandic people working in those establishments. Really, the only Icelandic person we met was the last day before we flew out to Vancouver to get on a cruise ship over to Hawaii, was an Icelandic tour guide, and we'd done a 3-hour walking city tour of Reykjavik, which I highly recommend. I highly recommend a walking tour of Reykjavik, Iceland, with a walking tour guide, and he was born and bred there. And here's a fun fact: everyone in Iceland is related. They're all related. And before you can marry someone there, marry your partner, you have to ask a question: how far back does your family go? Because by law, from what he was telling us, it's 5 generations and beyond, that's when you can marry. So they're all related in some way, shape or form. 400,000 population. There's no guns in Iceland. The security don't have guns. Police don't have guns. The only guns or weapons you will see are located in the US Embassy. Hello, who would have thought? That's the only time you'll see weapons or guns in Iceland, is in the US Embassy. The Parliament of Iceland, anybody can walk in, just walk straight through. Iceland is one of the safest countries in the world. And that leads me back to the hotels. We weren't unloading the car every afternoon or every night when we got to our next hotel. We only took out what we needed. I brought the camera gear in and left a lot of the luggage back inside the car, but only brought in the motel room what we needed for that night and the next day. So we weren't unloading and loading the car every afternoon or every night. So keep that in mind. There's just a few things that you need to know, but I rate it 9 out of 10. An incredible country, Iceland, and photographic wise, it is just beyond belief. It really is. And I don't think, for as long as I live, I don't think I'll ever see a landscape like it, to be quite honest. Black, frozen rock, volcanic rock, just covered in this green moss for miles. It is just an incredible country to visit. So that's just a rundown of our trip to Iceland. Let me know what you think. Are you thinking about going to Iceland? Have you been to Iceland? Let me know. What's your thoughts on it? How did you do it? Or if you're thinking about going to Iceland, how are you going to do it? But as I said, probably the best way is to do it in about 10 or 11 days, no shorter, and hire a 4-wheel drive or hire a bigger car and just drive around. That's the best way to see Iceland. You need a minimum of 10 days to see the country properly, because it's going to take you all day with your stops along the way between Hotel A and Hotel B, Hotel C, Hotel D, because you're stopping every 5 minutes to take photographs. And we were actually driving along the ring road and we come through a storm, and then this magnificent rainbow happened. And you'll see this photograph in this video, and we captured that as well. So you just got to keep an eye out for the weather and just watch what the light's doing. It's just phenomenal. It's just an incredible place, Iceland. So let me know what you think. Put your comments down below. Thank you for joining me here today. People that have subscribed, I really appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, the bell next door, so you don't miss anything. And so till next time, my name's Glenn Samuel. You've been watching Sniper Photography, and as I always say, be nice to yourself, family and friends, but most of all, you keep shooting, keep smiling. Bye for now.